How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the hottest show in the streets. I am Justin Smith. I am stepping in for Steven on today. And today we're going to talk about a little bit of recruiting. We're going to talk about the Crimson Tide as they continue to stay hot on the recruiting trail. Also talk about some young Alabama players for you guys to watch out for. Some guys I've had an opportunity to cover throughout their high school careers, and now they are in Tuscaloosa. I will talk about what they bring to the table and why I feel like you guys should be excited about them in the future and what they could do in Tuscaloosa for the Crimson Tide. Before I dive into any of that, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well. If you are already a loyal subscribers, be sure to hit that notification bell so you can be notified when we drop content on our YouTube YouTube channel. Also head over to touchdownalabama.com to subscribe to TDA Plus so you get all of our exclusive recruiting information, just all of our exclusive content that you guys can check out, where there's the multiple video shows that we have with Stephen M. Smith, where he goes behind the scene and talk about a lot of things that are going on in Alabama football and some of his past experiences. You guys can check out Justin and Dex, a show I have with recruiting expert Dexter Tolbert, as he breaks down some of the latest and just recruiting news in general, and talk about a lot of Alabama football targets and commits on that show as well. So be sure to subscribe to TDA Plus if you haven't already. Be sure to drop a super chat as well. Our super chat goal is located on the screen there. All of those are appreciated. So thank you guys so much for joining me on today. And as I said, like I said at the beginning of the show, I do want to talk about 5 young Alabama players I'm excited about. Some of these guys may not crack the rotation at their particular position this upcoming season, but I do think they have an opportunity to do special things in Tuscaloosa. Some of these guys, I fell in love with their game at the high school football level. I really enjoyed covering them, really enjoyed getting out to see most of them in person and watching what they bring to the table. And I think they can be effective in Tuscaloosa for a variety of reasons. And the first guy I want to talk about is James Smith. James Smith, who's a product of Carver Montgomery High School in Montgomery, Alabama. I'll also talk about Roderus Morgan, Quay, Russaw, Pierre, and Zaven Brown. These are 5 guys who I'm just excited about in terms of what they bring to the table. I really can talk about so many other guys on Alabama's roster who are really, really good as well. But these are just 5 guys I just really, really like at this particular point, with them coming into Tuscaloosa for their first year, like a Zaven Brown and Roderus Morgan, and also guys who are going to their second year in Tuscaloosa, like a Pierre, like a Russaw, and like a Smith. But I'm going to start with James Smith. Like I said, a former 5-star defensive lineman out of Carver Montgomery High School in Montgomery, Alabama. And I think something that has remained constant throughout Nick Saban's time in Tuscaloosa was that you had to have some Alabama talent, some Alabama flavor on your team, because those guys grew up fans of the Crimson Tide. A lot of them grew up with Nick Saban being the head coach of the Crimson Tide. So they knew when you were getting recruited by Alabama, it meant something. They knew going to Alabama meant something. They knew it was different to be recruited by Alabama. And I think James Smith is one of those guys who possesses that trait, along with the mentality that he brings to the game. I think this is a physical bully type of defensive lineman. That's the only thing that I saw from him at Carver Montgomery High School. This is a guy who seemed to have a controlled chaos. He just seemed to love being the bully. He's about 6'3", 296 pounds right now, with just an explosive, mean, nasty defensive lineman in the trenches, could play in space as well, just dominant all around. I did feel just him when we first got to Tuscaloosa that there were some more technical parts of his game that he had to fix before he was able to get on the field, and that's one of the reasons why I felt like he wasn't an immediate contributor. I think that was the biggest difference between him and former 5-star defensive lineman and Clemson freshman Peter Woods. I just felt Peter was a little bit more technically sound than James Smith was, but Smith had this whole different type of nastiness to his game, and I think is going to show pretty soon in Tuscaloosa. I think he's the type of guy that Alabama needs up front. I think the Crimson Tide have been missing that type of tenacity, that type of physicalness, that type of mean streak on the defensive side of football, up front in the interior of their defensive line. When you've seen Alabama's defense be at its best under Nick Saban, they had those dominant defensive linemen in the trenches. And if you just look at what the Crimson Tide have produced when it comes to defensive linemen to the NFL, it has been a bit of a drop-off. When you talk about guys like Quinn Williams, you talk about a Deron Payne, you talk about Jonathan Allen. Those are guys who went early in the NFL draft and are having had early success in the NFL and are continuing to have success in the NFL. It's no coincidence that Alabama's defense has taking a step back when you talk about the defenses that those guys played on. And if you have a talent up front who's dominant, who can control things and just get offenses off track, I think your defense is just good. It's on a whole nother level. I think the Crimson Tide needs that on their defensive side of football, specifically in the trenches. You need those mean, disruptive guys. I think James Smith has an opportunity to be that, along with some other guys, because he can't do it on his own. If Alabama wants to get back to the defense of old, which I think is possible, although some people may argue against it because of how explosive, because of how electric offenses are in college football, just in football in general, they are right now. But I think Georgia even showed us that, you can have a dominant defense in this age of college football. And I think if Alabama wants to get back to that, they need guys like James Smith to show that nastiness, to be dangerous, to be explosive, to be just mean in the trenches, because that is what it all come down to. In my opinion, I think Alabama has had too many nice guys up front, to be real with you, over the last couple of years. And if they can get some dominant guys who have that mean streak, I think things could change for the Crimson Tide on the defensive side of football, and then get back to being that dominant defense of old. Another guy who I'm really excited to see flourish in Tuscaloosa is Quay Russaw, who's a former teammate of James Smith out of Carver Montgomery High School in Montgomery, Alabama as well. When you saw this guy in high school, he immediately stood out. When Carver Montgomery took the field, he was the first guy you probably noticed. You're like, who in the heck is that kid? Because he looked like a monster. He's one of those guys who's just naturally muscular, physically gifted in terms of his body and in terms of his frame. He's a guy who continued to grow at Carver Montgomery High School, along with that physicality that he brought with that frame and along with that strength that he already possessed. He's a guy who had like a 4.3, 4.4 40. So his closing speed was incredible when you watch his film. I think it's some of the best closing speed that you're ever going to watch. If you have an opportunity to just go back and watch Quay Russaw's high school film, you're going to see his closing speed is just ridiculous. And I think that's going to help him contribute in space, playing that wolf outside linebacker position for the Crimson Tide under Kane Womack. And I think he's the type of linebacker that you need in today's game of college football. You need those hybrid guys, athletic guys, who are going to defend those fast and explosive wide receivers, running backs in the open field. And that is why you're seeing the linebacker position just change as a whole. I think we're going away from those days where you have these 250, 260 linebackers. These guys are 230, 240. Actually, Quay Russaw, 6'2", 242. He's on a bigger side when you talk about linebackers in today's world of college football. Deontay Lawson, the Crimson Tide starting linebacker, the leader of their defense, on their roster, he's listed at 230. So I think those days are over. I think you're trying to get those lean type of linebackers, guys who can play in space, guys who can defend those speedy, explosive wide receivers, defend those tight ends who are just continuing to get better and still continue to be big as well. You can just take a look at college football in the NFL. But I think Quay Russaw is a guy who has the potential to just be electric for the Crimson Tide for so many different reasons. I think his physicality, the strength that he brings, I think he's going to be a guy who's able to get off of blocks, but he's also going to be able to be a guy to get after the football with that closing speed. So I think Quay Russaw is going to bring a lot to the table. I will pay attention to him. He's exciting to watch. If you go back and watch his high school highlights, you're going to see why I feel that way about Russaw. Red Morgan is another guy, another in-state kid, a kid who listed at 175 on Alabama's roster right now. He might have weighed 160 at Central Phoenix City, but he plays so much bigger. A guy who literally played with his hair on fire, just flying all over the field for the Central Phoenix City Red Devils as they won a state championship with him during his senior season. I remember when the Crimson Tide offered him, I turned on his film. I was blown away. I was like, dog, this guy is getting to the football really, really quickly. And one of the first things that stood out to me was the fact that he was the first person down consistently on kickoff. That is one of the first things any college coach likes to see when they turn on a guy's film. You're going to see college coaches when they're evaluating recruits, one of the first things they want to see is this guy play kickoff. How fast is he getting down? Is he beating all of his teammates down? And is he making a tackle? Roderus Morgan is his real name, but Red Morgan is his name on Alabama's roster. He was the guy who just consistently got down, showing that effort. And I think that's one of the things that immediately stood out when I watched Red Morgan's film. And he played like that at safety as well. Just seemed to have a really good feel for where the ball was going. And once he figured out where the ball was going, he immediately attacked it really well. Had high praise throughout the spring from Alabama's players, Alabama's coaches. Malachi Moore spoke highly of Red Morgan. I remember being at the Crimson Tide's first media availability during the spring. Reporters asked Malachi who was the freshman that was standing out. Said Red Morgan. Red Morgan was the first name that he said. Multiple members of the Crimson Tide's coaching staff, including Kalen DeBoer, had great things to say about Morgan as well. I think he flashed during the Crimson Tide spring game. So I think he's a guy who actually could make an immediate impact in Tuscaloosa. And I think it just goes back to the way that he plays, just fast, physical, and a guy who's just not afraid because he's a smaller guy. Even right now on Alabama's roster at 175, you go back and watch him through spring practice and you watch some video clips, like, yo, that guy is pretty small, but his game is big. I'm telling you, in terms of what he brings to the table from the standpoint of just a feel for the game, his ability to just be fearless. He's a guy who made some big hits as well, although he doesn't have a lot of weight to swing around. So Red Morgan, explosive, explosive, fast, a guy who just hungry for the football. I really like his game. I just really like the heart that he plays with. A guy who just plays much bigger than his listed height and weight, even at the moment, with him being 6 foot, 175 pounds. Pierre, another in-state guy. I didn't pick these guys because they were in-state guys. I just happened to see them play, and I just really love their game. And Pierre is a former 5-star as well out of Eufaula High School and Eufaula, Alabama. I think he's one of those guys we can put in the category of may not make an impact this particular season, but I think his impact will be felt in Tuscaloosa in the future if he does sticks it out and stick with the Todd. He's a guy, when I saw him play, I think it was crazy how fast he got into the backfield. In terms of how quickly he was able to time the snap of the football, it almost looked as if he was in the backfield before the ball even snapped. And it was consistent whenever I saw him play. He did it throughout the game. There was no plays taken off. Great backside pursuit. I think he's a guy who's just going to continue to grow in this new Alabama defense. And I think he just fit that mold too at about 6'4". I think Alabama seems to be going away from those really, really lengthy outside linebackers in terms of guys who are probably like 6'5", 6'6". At that linebacker position. I think they want to be in that 6'2" to 6'4" range in this Kane Womack defense. This just seemed to be the trend that they are recruiting. A lot of guys who came in this last recruiting cycle, the first edge, I guess you can say, that got recruited under the Dubois era was Noah Carter, about 6'4". So I think he's that perfect size. I think the Crimson Tide is going to go after at that particular position now under this Kalen DeBoer and Kane Womack defensive system, and I think Pierre is a guy who can fit into it really well as he continues to put on weight, continues to get better as well. And if he can keep that same explosiveness, that same feel for the snap of the football, he's going to be a guy that's going to be exciting to watch in Tuscaloosa as well. The last guy is a guy who actually didn't go to school in Alabama. He actually went to school on the West Coast, a product of Mater Dei High School in California, and I'm talking about Zaven Brown, a guy, when you watch his film, it's T-shaped. It's crazy how effective and how technically sound this guy is at cornerback. If I had a kid that was playing cornerback, I would turn on Zaven Brown film and say, yo, look at this guy's film. How technically sound he is. Look at the way he trails the wide receiver. Look at the way that he knows and got a feel for the position, how confident he is. Because like I always say, a defensive back, specifically at cornerback, you have to be overly confident. You got to be out of your mind confident, because wide receivers are just confident. That's why they get that prima donna kind of slogan thrown on them to be that defensive back. You want to go up against that wide receiver, you have to be out of your mind. It's overly confident, and it has to show in your game. Turn on Zaven Brown film, it shows on every single play. Just how consistently he is in his coverage, in his technical skill. And I like the way that he plays of rider coverage, press man coverage, off man coverage, a lot of different things. In terms of him trailing, I think one of the things that really stood out and just blew my mind, because I don't see it a lot of times. A lot of times I see defensive backs who are so out of place, panicking. That's usually where those pass interferences come in, because those guys are panicking. They do not turn around. I never seen a cornerback catch an interception like this. And Zaven Brown is a guy who really got a great feel for that. Whenever the wide receiver turns his head, that's when Zaven Brown turns his head. When I saw that, I was like, yo, everything is perfect about this guy's coverage. He's always going to be in the right position. He's always going to be able to make a living in coverage as a cornerback. And he's also a guy who can come downhill and make tackles, because you're going to have to make tackles to be effective at the defensive back at cornerback. That's in the secondary. If you're not making tackles, you're not going to get on the field. That's point blank, period. But those are 5 guys who I feel Alabama fans should be excited about. I don't know if all of them will make an impact this season. I think all of them have an opportunity. All of them definitely have a chance. And there's so many other guys on the Alabama roster who I could have talked about, because I think Alabama's roster in terms of that new recruiting class that they brought in are really, really good. Of course, I could have talked about Ryan Williams, because he's just a different type of animal. He's a different type of beast. But I think I wanted to talk about some more of defensive players and guys so I feel Alabama fans should keep their eyes on. But now we're going to take a break. But when we come back, we're going to go to a call segment. You guys can call in. I will answer all of your questions. There can be recruiting questions, because we are going to talk about a lot of recruiting as the show goes on. So be sure to call in at 205-448-1358. Now we'll see you guys on the other side of this break.
TDA Plus is the all-new Ultimate Alabama Football package, perfect for any Alabama football fan. Not only do you get subscriber-only articles where you can stay up to date on everything that's going on with Alabama football, you also get our brand new video hub that features many podcasts and shows, including Steven's Report with Stephen M. Smith. With over 15 years of covering Alabama football, you get trusted information as Stephen goes in person to see the team come back and break down to you what he saw live in person. You also get the Way It Is podcast with Stephen M. Smith, where he tells never heard before stories and crazy situations that happened during his 15-year tenure of covering Alabama football. You also get Justin and Dex, where they break down recruits like you've never seen it before, with exclusive behind-the-scenes information and exclusive interviews with recruits. You also get Justin's Recruiting Bites with Justin Smith, where you get the best up-close and personal recruiting information and even talks to you while he's on the road going to recruiting events. Alabama fans, you don't want to miss this huge offer for a jam-packed experience for only $7.95 per month. Visit touchdownalabama.com and become a TDA Plus member today.
Thank you for tuning in. Show your support right now by clicking that like button. If you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button now and enable all notifications to make sure you don't ever miss any of the best Alabama football news, notes, and information right here on Touchdown Alabama.
We are back on In My Own Words, the hottest show in the streets for Alabama football news, notes, and information. I am stepping in for Steven on tonight. I'm Justin Smith, the Director of Recruiting for Touchdown Alabama. And now we're going to go to the call line. You guys get an opportunity to call in, ask me questions. It could be Alabama football related. It could be Alabama football recruiting related as well. So be sure to call in at 205-448-1358. Do have a caller on the line. You are live on the show. What's going on? Caller, you're alive.
Justin, what up with you, man? I can't hear you.
Yeah, what's up, man? Hey, you're live on the show. What's up, man? I think we have some technical difficulties. I'm not sure if the caller can hear me or not. But while we figure that out, but we're going to talk about a couple of different things while those technical difficulties are getting figured out by our producer here at Touchdown on Alabama.com. But like I said on the previous segment, I do want to talk about some Alabama football recruiting. I do feel the Crimson Tide have an opportunity to push for that #1 recruiting class across multiple recruiting sites when it comes to the 2025 recruiting cycle for multiple different reasons. The Crimson Tide's recruiting class currently stands at about 17 commits at the moment, leading the way are guys like Keelan Russell, Derek Smith, the 4-star athlete who's a freak show. I think Derek Smith has an opportunity to be really good in the future. He's one of those few prospects. I don't think I've covered too many prospects. I can't really think of too many prospects who I've covered who have legit Power 4 offers, because it is the Power 4 now, to play on both sides of the football. Like, there are schools who want this guy a defense. There are schools who want this guy a wide receiver. I don't think I've seen that that many times. We've seen guys play on multiple sides of the ball, and the coach might say, hey, we're going to let you play on that side of football. And that's usually just all talk. Like, they're just usually trying to get that guy in the door. But Derek Smith was a guy who legit had that type of clout on the recruiting trail. So I think he is a nice get for the Crimson Tide in this 2025 recruiting class. And when you look at the rest of it, their offensive line class is starting to coming to shape when you got a guy like Michael Carroll, whose film is also really exciting. The way that this guy pulls and blocks. Get out of the way. If you are a defensive lineman, when you see Michael Carroll coming at you, also have the guy who they recently picked up, Jackson Lloyd, 6'7", 290-pound athlete, played baseball, basketball, and football for Carmel High School in Carmel, California. And he's a guy who blocks in space really well, can get up to that second level. When he's called upon to block for a screenplay, he can do that. The Crimson Tide also have Maul Waldrop, the 4-star offensive lineman out of Central Phoenix City High School in Phoenix City, Alabama. The Crimson Tide are starting to have more and more success with the Red Devils. He's a guy I think who just has a lot of potential, has that prototypical size and frame for a tackle in today's game at about 6'5". So the Crimson Tide's offensive line class taking shape. They are still after a lot of different targets, like a Ty Haywood, like a Michael Dubois, who I'll talk about a little bit later on this episode of In My Own Words. The Crimson Tide also have their quarterback, Keelan Russell, and he's turning a lot of heads at the Elite 11 finals. And going back to what his private quarterback trainer who trained Jalen Mirrell has trained some other college quarterbacks, guys who went on to the NFL as well. He told me that he flats out feels that he could be better than Jalen Miro. He felt that Russell one day could be better than Jalen Miro. And I think that is saying a lot because I think Miro has a bit of a high ceiling. And I think there's a lot of untapped potential when it comes to Jalen Miro. Whenever I talk about him, I would say once he continues to grow as a passer and just continue to grow in those immediate passing routes. I think that short to medium passing route tree, I think that is where Jalen Miro needs to improve the most because his deep ball is pretty accurate. It's pretty on point. I don't think there's probably not be a better deep ball coming into college football than Jalen Miro. So if he can improve his medium to short passes, I think he's going to be an incredible quarterback. He's going to be exciting. He's going to be dang near unstoppable because if he's able to do that, how can you defend that the way that he runs the football? So his private quarterback trainer, Brad Stanfield, said he flats out feels that Keelan Russell one day could be better than Jalen Miro, and I think that says a lot about what Russell brings to the table. They have Anthony Rogers, who doesn't get talked about enough, in my opinion. I think because he's been committed for so long. We see that trend a lot when you're covering recruiting. When a guy commits early, his popularity seems to take a hit when you commit early, and because you don't really have a lot of people talking about you all the time. You're not taking a lot of visits. You're not still on the board. You're not leaning to a particular school. You're committed, so you don't get talked about a lot. But Rogers definitely deserves to be talked about. He's definitely in the conversation to probably be one of the better pass catchers out of the backfield in this 2025 recruiting class. He's explosive. He accelerates. He's a guy who just always seems to be accelerating when he's on the football field. Although he's a bit of a smaller back, he runs pretty tough. He's not going to be one guy that takes Anthony Rogers down. Arm tackles are not going to work. You got to bring your arms. You got to bring a pass. You got to wrap up to take down Anthony Rogers. So the Crimson Tide's 2025 recruiting class, for a lot of different reasons, has an opportunity to be a #1 recruiting class. I think this is a result of a lot of hard work and a lot of quick work by the new Alabama coaching staff. And I would dive into that in a segment later on in this episode because I feel Alabama's new staff has came out and made a statement. And I think they're really capitalizing on the success that Alabama has already established under Nick Saban for the most part, and they're continuing to do that in a different way, with a different type of twist, with a little bit of a different flavor when it comes to this 2025 recruiting cycle. Still a lot of targets on the board. Travis Smith Jr., Michael Dubois. The Crimson Tide also looking at Akilin Deer, trying to flip him from Ole Miss. Several other flip targets who will eventually get on campus. And this is not the end. The summer is just usually the hot part of the recruiting cycle. You still have the fall. There are guys who want to get on campus for official visits. If I was a recruit, I think I would lean more towards getting on campus for official visits during the season because you get an opportunity to actually watch a football game. And you can go to probably one of the better games of college football. So you're going to see a lot of guys officially visiting the Crimson Tide. I think that's when flip season is really going to start to happen for the Crimson Tide. If I had to take a shot at just guessing that, in my opinion, because there's no official visit limit anymore. Recruits can take as many official visits as they want to. It used to be a limit, they only could take 5. Now they can take as many as they want to. So I think the Crimson Tide are going to get a lot of guys who are interested in going to a big game in Tuscaloosa on campus at some point during the season. I think they're going to have opportunity to change some minds. So I would watch out for flip season more so during the season. But the Crimson Tide are starting to do a lot of work on the recruiting trail, and I think that flip season is just going to come to fruition because those guys are going to get on campus, and Alabama is working on those guys, getting into their ears, getting them something to think about. I think they're going to be able to really take advantage of that during the season. But now we're going to go to another break. When we come back, we talk about the latest Alabama football recruiting notes. I'm going to talk about some information that I was able to obtain, whether it's over today or yesterday. A lot of things happen in recruiting all the time. But when we come back from the break, I will talk about those latest recruiting updates.
We're out here at Alumni Hall in Tuscaloosa. Oh yeah, this. Oh, man. Gotta get this. Gotta get one of these right here. Can't rock that Bama without this shirt right here, fresh polo. You gotta also rock the all pink, like Kanye West right there. Keychains, gotta get you some keychains. University of Alabama keychains. I'm telling you, if you are a die-hard Alabama fan and you're looking for some big-time apparel, this place has got everything. We're talking shirts, shoes, sweatshirts, hoodies, cups, mugs, keychains. If you're just a Tide fan that has an itch to get more apparel, get more swag in your game, you come right here at Alumni Hall in Tuscaloosa, right here in Midtown Village. And also you can shop online. The link is in the description to get your gear right here at Alumni Hall.
Thank you for tuning in. Show your support right now by clicking that like button. If you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button now and enable all notifications to make sure you don't ever miss any of the best Alabama football news, notes, and information right here on Touchdown Alabama.
We're back live on In My Own Words, the hottest show in the streets. And like I said before the break, we're going to talk about some of the latest recruiting updates when it comes to Alabama football. I am stepping in for Steven on today. I am the Director of Recruiting, Justin Smith of TouchdownAlabama.com. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this episode of In My Own Words. Be sure to hit that like button while you're here. Hit that subscribe button as well. If you're not one of our loyal subscribers already, be sure to hit the notification bell so you can be notified when we drop content on our YouTube channel. But I do want to talk about the Crimson Tide's latest recruiting updates. Alabama has been rolling on the recruiting trail. They have been on fire, you can say. And I think Kalen DeBoer and his Alabama staff have really showing that they have an opportunity to be an elite recruiting staff. And I'm going to talk about a couple of those latest recruiting updates, starting with Travis Smith Jr., a four-star wide receiver out of Westlake High School in Georgia. Had an opportunity to see him at the Under Armour Next Camp in Georgia a couple of months ago. He was really, really impressive. When you watch his film, you see that he's a 6'4", bigger, physical wide receiver. But when I saw him participate in camp, I said, yo, this guy runs control routes to go along with that 6'4", for him, the guy who can go up and get those contested catches. So I think his ability to run routes is just an added plus. He's one of those guys Alabama has seemed to immediately prioritize when they offered him, and I think they're continuing to rise on his board in terms of him looking at the Crimson Tide. He's a guy who officially visited Alabama over the weekend along with several other guys who were on campus. But I want to talk about Smith a little bit. Had an opportunity to catch up with Kalen DeBoer, had an opportunity to catch up with Alabama's wide receiver coach, Marcus Shepard, and he had a lot of good things to say about Alabama, kind of like where they stand in his recruitment. I will read his quote after him taking an official visit. He said, "I was the only wide receiver on official visit this weekend, so it felt very exclusive. I spent a lot of time with the staff, especially Coach Shepard, who's a high energy coach who knows how to produce NFL caliber guys at that position." And that just, in my mind, I think it puts me in the position to say that I feel that Kalen DeBoer and Jamarcus Shepard are in a really unique position when it comes to recruiting wide receivers. Because if you didn't know, Kalen DeBoer actually played wide receiver in college as well. And Jamarcus Shepard developed some great receivers at Washington this past season. Just take a look at the latest NFL draft with one of the top wide receivers come out the board being Rome Odunze, who went to the Chicago Bears, who's from Washington. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Washington had 3 1,000-yard receivers on last season. And I think Jeremy Bernard, who transferred to Alabama, he was like 4 or 5, and he even had like 400 or 500 yards. So in this Kalen DeBoer offense and the way that Jamarcus Shepard develops wide receivers, he wants those guys to be active. He wants those guys to be hungry. He wants those guys to be productive. And I think they are selling that to Travis Smith and all of the other wide receivers who they are recruiting. Shepard spent a lot of time with Travis Smith, and this isn't the first time that Shepard has spent this amount of time with Smith. He actually spent an hour with him when he offered him. So he had an opportunity to sit back an hour one-on-one during an unofficial visit with Smith and just introduce himself, because it was the first time he was talking with Smith as an Alabama coach. And we are seeing a trend. I think Smith is just one of those guys who I'm going to talk about on his next segment, who just really personifies this trend with Alabama's coaching staff immediately coming in and making guys priority targets. And I think Travis Smith Jr. is one of those guys, and I think Alabama made a move for him this past weekend. He's set to announce his commitment on July 13th. Georgia is very involved, home state school. They hosted him for an official visit as well. I think Georgia's a team to pay attention to, along with the Crimson Tide. Could be another one of those classic Georgia-Alabama battles with new faces this time around, with Kirby Smart still at Georgia, and with Kalen DeBoer taking over for Nick Saban in Tuscaloosa. I also want to talk about Justice Terry, a 5-star defensive lineman out of Georgia who was once verbally committed to the Bulldogs. Flipped his commitment to USC. Now he's decommitted. Actually decommitted on today. Had an opportunity to catch up with Justice Terry, and he told me that he is heading to Tuscaloosa this weekend. The Crimson Tide will have the 5-star on campus along with several other official visitors, including Michael Dubois, who I'll talk about a little bit later in this segment. But Justice Terry, when you take a look at what he brings to the table, 6'5", 265 pounds, you don't supposed to be able to move like the way that this guy moves. And he's dominant. When you turn on his film, he tests great. So in terms of in his ability to be effective like it is, like at an Under Armour camp, he's a guy who's technically sound. I think he's a guy who has that working for his game. You see him working a long arm on that particular play at that particular camp. So he has some rush moves in his game to go along with that dominance, to go along with that athleticism at 6'5" and 265 pounds. So the Crimson Tide will have an opportunity to get into the head of Justice Terry. He felt the Crimson Tide were in a really good position with him at this particular camp. Told multiple reporters that he feels that if he was to flip, he was going to flip to Alabama. So that's why when he flipped to USC, it was kind of like different from what he said. Because he said, which is what happens in recruiting. They say one thing and do another. He said if he flipped, Alabama probably going to be the school that he was going to flip to. So now that he's backed off his commitment to USC, he's looking at the Crimson Tide. He's also going to look at Georgia. Home state school similar to Travis Smith. Another Alabama-Georgia battle just like Travis Smith. I think Terry's going to have a really, really interesting recruitment if the Crimson Tide can make a move and really get into his ear this weekend. The Crimson Tide's defensive line coach Freddie Roach is a heck of a recruiter. Alabama currently has 2 other interior defensive linemen committed in this 2025 recruiting class in London Simmons and also Antonio Coleman, the 4-star defensive lineman out of Saraland High School in Alabama. When you take a look at Justice Terry, he's a little bit more of the traditional type of defensive lineman the Power 4 programs are going after. You kind of can say Coleman and Simmons are a little bit undersized in terms of their height, in terms of their length. Justice Terry is a guy who checks all the boxes. That's why he's a consensus 5-star recruit. There's not a recruiting site, major recruiting site that does not have Justice Terry listed as a 5-star prospect. Next guy I want to take a look at is Michael Dubois, an in-state 4-star offensive lineman who will be in Tuscaloosa on this weekend. And I think Alabama has continued to trend with Dubois out of Viger High School for several different reasons. I think Alabama's coaching staff immediately came in and was able to show Dubois that things are not going to change in Tuscaloosa, at least convince him that things are not going to change in Tuscaloosa before actually building a team and putting a team on a field. I caught up with him at that Under Armour camp in Atlanta a couple of months ago as well, and he told me the first thing he said, Alabama is going to be Alabama in his mind. He feels this new coaching staff is going to continue to do great things in Tuscaloosa, and I think Alabama's new coaching staff has just seemed to do a really good job of just immediately showing these guys or telling these guys or convincing these guys using their recruiting, using the ability to be recruiting experts and being recruiters to show that, hey, and convince these kids that, yo, Alabama's going to be Alabama. We're going to continue to keep this train rolling. And I think they have been able to show that to the Viger product, who has had a previous relationship with the Crimson Tide's defensive coordinator, Kane Womack, who is the former head coach of South Alabama, with him being in that Mobile area out of Viger High School. So Dubois will be in Tuscaloosa on this weekend. A guy who I think Alabama is trending for the last month or so. Whenever I write a story about who is going to commit to Alabama next, I've been including Dubois in all of those stories because I think the Crimson Tide are just in a really, really good position with him. Has some Georgia ties similar to the first 2 guys that we talked about because he was once verbally committed to Georgia. So Dubois has got to watch as well this weekend with him headed to Tuscaloosa. Could be on commitment watch, so he's a guy I definitely would pay attention to. The last guy I want to talk about is Akilin Deer, a 2025 4-star running back. Had an opportunity to see him in Atlanta, an opportunity to catch up with him after he took an official visit to the University of Alabama over the weekend. He told me that he feels that Alabama is a place that they have people where you want to be at. The type of people that Alabama have are the people that you want to be around. That is the first thing that he said when I asked him just how that official visit went. He just loved the people around Alabama. And it's not the first time he has said something like that. When I caught up with him in Atlanta, he told me that the only reason he was still considering Alabama was the fact that they retained Robert Gillespie, the running back coach. And I've heard this from several different running backs. I even heard it from the Crimson Tide's running back commit, Anthony Rogers. So retaining Gillespie was huge for Kalen DeBoer when it comes to recruiting. So Akilin Deer, he's a guy I think Alabama stayed in the mix for him because they kept Robert Gillespie, was able to stay in contact with them. Gillespie got out to visit him when he had an opportunity to visit recruits before he got on campus for that official visit. The Crimson Tide's freshman running back, Daniel Hill, who is a product of Meridian High School in Meridian, Alabama, very close to Quitman, Mississippi, which is where Akilin Deer is. Another thing that's really interesting about Deer is that he is verbally committed to Ole Miss, but he only stays like an hour and 30 minutes from Tuscaloosa, even though he's in Mississippi. So I think that's something to pay attention to as well. Although Alabama is not an in-state school for Akilin, he's closer to the University of Alabama than several in-state targets. So I think that's something of note as well. He also has went on record and spoke highly about the way that Kalen DeBoer in Washington used Dylan Johnson, who was their running back last season. And Johnson is a product of Mississippi as well. So he said that he liked the way that Kalen DeBoer was able to use a Mississippi product. And Johnson, kind of like that, the way Washington operated, was effective running the football and also effective catching the football out of the backfield, which is something Deer does really well. So Akilin Deer is a guy we'll watch out for, verbally committed to Ole Miss. I think the Crimson Tide improved their position with him. One of those interesting guys, like I kind of want to say he's one of those prospects I feel could flip at any time. If he doesn't flip now, it's going to be more so later. I feel like he's one of those guys, and then it's kind of like the trend you see when Alabama working to flip a guy. They're in position to flip him. They usually flip him right around the time that the rumors and all of the momentum is building up, or usually that momentum dies off. Then they flip them late in the recruiting cycle because they just have continued to chip away at that recruit. So Akilin Deer is a guy I think I would put in that category. Could flip at any time. If he doesn't flip at around like couple of weeks or a month or so from now, I think it's probably going to be a break. And then if Alabama did go on to flip him, most likely be during the early signing period, or like close to National Signing Day, one of those type of recruitments. But those are the recruiting updates I want to provide you guys with today. I'm Travis Smith, Justice Terry, Michael Dubois, and also taking a look at the 4-star Ole Miss running back commit, Kalen Deer. Going to take another break, but when we come back, I'm going to talk about why I feel Kalen DeBoer and this new Alabama staff have shown that they are elite recruiters, and this is one of the reasons why they are on track to possibly capture that number one recruiting class in this 2025 recruiting cycle. I'll talk about that on the other side of this break.
I'm Malachi Moore. You're watching In My Own Words with Stephen M. Smith on Touchdown Alabama YouTube channel.
Thank you for tuning in. Show your support right now by clicking that like button. If you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button now and enable all notifications to make sure you don't ever miss any of the best Alabama football news, notes, and information right here on Touchdown Alabama.
What's going on? This is Benny Bice. I'm the founder and owner of Touchdown Alabama. And you guys are supporting one of the only independent outlets covering Alabama football today. No other sports, no networks, just Alabama football. Roll Tide Roll.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to In My Own Words, the hottest show in the streets. I am your host, Justin Smith, the director of recruiting for Touchdown Alabama. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well. Subscribers, hit that notification bell. Be notified when we drop content on our YouTube channel. And like I've been saying consistently through this episode here, as we close out things, I think the Crimson Tide recruiting is in a really critical place. I think it's in a spot where I think they have an opportunity to steal their spot as elite recruiters. And it's kind of funny saying it this early because a couple of months ago, that was one of the biggest critiques. Once Kalen DeBoer got to Tuscaloosa, once he stepped out of the airplane, Kalen DeBoer can't recruit. He's not going to be able to recruit in the SEC. He's not going to be able to recruit the South, because we all know the South is going to be very important for Alabama, because it has been important in the past. Look at Alabama's roster. Those are mostly guys from the South. A lot of in-state guys too. That's why I talk about that Alabama flavor at the beginning of the show, because no matter how good Alabama has been, no matter how tough and dominant they were under Nick Saban, they had a lot of in-state talent. And I don't think that's probably never going to change in Tuscaloosa. So I think that's going to have to be a priority for the Crimson Tide moving forward. And I think this new Alabama coaching staff, I think, have a great feel for that. I think they have shown that they are elite recruiters, and they showed this pretty quickly and early on as well. I think they have shown that they are going to prioritize guys who they really like, and they're going to know who those guys are pretty early. The moment that they stepped on campus, they start offering guys who are committing now. These are not guys who are just committing because they got the offer yesterday. A lot of those guys got the offer like in January. Jackson Lord is the perfect example. He's the first public offer from the new Alabama staff. So Alabama was able to come in and say, yo, this 6'7", 295-pound offensive lineman out of California, that is who I want on my team. And I think Alabama's coaching staff was able to prioritize, focus on those guys, and I think it's starting to pay off. And it's not the only example we've seen of this when you take a look at Alabama's 2025 recruiting class. Saw this with Russaw as well, Akilin Russaw. The moment that they noticed that, hey, this guy's our guy, things started to move in Alabama's direction for them to pick up a commitment from Kalen Russaw. Some other guys are a perfect example of this. Michael Carroll, a guy who Alabama's new staff offered, got him on campus 2 times before he even took an official visit during the month of June. They were able to get a commitment from him. So everything is just starting to work in that direction. It seems like if Alabama staff really likes a guy, this new staff, they lock in on that guy, they at least have an opportunity to make some noise when it comes to his recruitment. And I think it's something that we're going to continue to see. And in my opinion, I think they have shown that they are elite recruiters because they are getting into these families' homes in some situations where they've had an opportunity to go out to see some of these guys in person at their home. They get an opportunity to see them at their schools. They get an opportunity to get them on campus, and they are convincing them that Alabama is still going to be Alabama without even putting a team on the field. This staff has not put a team on the field. We don't know how this team is going to look under Kalen DeBoer, but this new staff is showing that they are such good recruiters that they are showing it without being able to fill the team. So there's no telling how good they're going to be able to recruit if they are having success on the field. Can you imagine what Alabama recruiting is going to look like if we look up and Kalen DeBoer and Alabama is 5-0, 6-0? I think that's when we're going to kind of see those flips, like I was talking about. That's when we're going to see the guys who Alabama is getting to the ear of, like a Naeem Alford, the 5-star defensive back out of Parker High School, who the Crimson Tide are recruiting. Right now, I don't see Alford backing off his commitment to Ohio State because he's one of those kids, I think, who really likes the Buckeyes. I think he's really locked in with Ohio State. If Alabama wants to keep him, they have to keep chipping away. They have to keep getting him on campus. He's a guy who you're going to watch out for if Alabama can get him on campus when they're 6-0, when they're 7-0, when it's a big game on campus. He's one of those guys to watch out for. And that is why I feel Alabama's coaching staff has really locked in on the fact that, hey, this is our lane. This is what we're going to do. And they're having a lot of success with it under their new general manager, Roderus Morgan, and the rest of Alabama staff who have coined the slogan, a cold summer. And they are definitely having a hot summer when it comes to their recruiting. But I think it's getting cold for some of the competition because it seems as if Alabama is not falling off when it comes to their recruiting success during the summer. And I don't think this is going to stop. I think the Crimson Tide have an opportunity to pick up multiple other commitments in this month alone, because they still have guys who have commitment decisions pending, like a Dijon Lee, the 5-star defensive back out of California. I think they can have Dubois, a guy who can be closer to a decision after this weekend. I think Kalen Deer is a guy to pay attention to, like I said, because I feel that he's a guy who most likely will make a decision when it comes to flipping here soon. Or if he doesn't, I think it'll cool off. It would kind of like see some more traction start to build more so towards National Signing Day or during times when it's time for him to actually sign a national letter of intent to a school of his choice. So in my opinion, I think the new Alabama staff have shown a lot of promise. I think they are indeed elite recruiters. I think it's going to be set in stone when they officially put pen to paper, because we all know that is when things are official. And I think if they're able to have some type of success, just any success, 6-0, 5-1, if they beat Georgia, I think that will be huge for recruiting, because I think they have done a lot without fielding a team. I think they're going to be able to show they can do even more if they're able to put a team on the field and they are able to deliver in the way that they're at least talking about it right now. So when they combine with the way that they are talking with the play on the field, I think Alabama is going to have no problem with recruiting and challenging for that #1 recruiting spot when it comes to the 2025 recruiting class. But that is going to wrap up this episode of In My Own Words. Thank you guys so much for joining me, adding a little bit recruiting flavor to the show. As always, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Subscribers, hit the notification bell, be notified when we drop content on our YouTube channel. I was stepping in for Steven today. I am Justin Smith, the director of recruiting for Touchdown Alabama. Steven will return pretty soon to keep you guys entertained on the latest Alabama football news, notes, and information. But thank you guys so much for joining me on today.